SKS Microfinance founder Vikram Akula bore the brunt of the backlash when Indian politicians turned on the micro-lending industry in 2010. He's now had years to reflect on what went wrong. We spoke to him about the lessons learned and what's next.
So I'm still a believer. I still believe that the market, that the private sector can really stimulate financial inclusion, stimulate growth. But I do think in retrospect it was premature to do that back in 2008, 2010 when I initially brought in venture capital funds. I think today, however, you've got a much healthier environment. You've got a much more mature industry. You have credit bureaus, you have credit scoring that's developing, you have RBI with a strong regulatory framework. So now may be the right time to harness the power of the private sector to help increase financial inclusion. Maybe 7, 8 years ago was too early. Maybe the industry wasn't ready for it. So two things. So one is, I actually stayed with SKS till 2011. So it's been 3 years since I've been away from the sector. But I would say that the main cause of the problem was that, the early microfinance players, including my own institution, had a great deal of success for years. SKS, for example, by 2010 had been in existence for 13 years. And that success, I think, attracted many newer players who didn't understand the rural ethos, that there's a certain way of doing finance with low-income people, and many of them simply didn't understand it. Some took shortcuts because they didn't understand it. Some took shortcuts because they didn't think it was important to have certain quality processes in place. And I think that led to an industry that ended up diluting practices that had been in place, that had been very strong, that had delivered finance very effectively for a decade or so. So the other thing that I think is extremely exciting is the RBI setting up small finance banks as well as payment banks. This, I think, is radically going to change the financial inclusion landscape in India. Number one, you're going to have many more players that, as small finance banks, will have an ability to deliver financial inclusion at a much lower cost with more convenience than has been done so far. Likewise, the payments banks infrastructure is something that we've been waiting for a long time. It will allow us to look to countries like Kenya and Philippines and replicate mobile money and some of the digital revolution that's taken place in those countries in India as well. So I think those are the two things that are most exciting for the future of financial inclusion in India. I think the key thing that we need to see, and in fact that we've already seen in India, is a strong set of rules. Today you have a very strong regulatory framework. The RBI has stepped in, has given guidelines on how to lend, what the interest rates are, what the maximum amount should be. And I think those types of rules will ensure that only quality players remain in financial inclusion and will keep out those people who are taking shortcuts, who want to take shortcuts.